ceasefire deal has been agreed to, kind of, and the Rafah operation has started, kind of. Yeah, last night, Hamas announced that it agreed to a ceasefire deal, one that was proposed by Egypt and that Israel had not agreed to, and that involves a ceasefire in exchange for the release of hostages, whether or not they're dead or alive. Uh, in some cases, well, we're not going to know until we get them, kind of deal. And then Israel started operating on some parts of the outskirts of Rafah on the border with Egypt, a minor operation. This followed, by the way, celebrations in Rafah by Palestinians, which is, what people do when they win. Of course, they assumed that Israel would agree to it. I think that's a pretty safe assumption, even though Israel didn't officially agree to it yet. So there have been developments. They're interesting. It's not clear what they are. What is clear is what we said every development would be since October 7th and before, which is bad for Israel because Israel won't stand up for itself. The Rafah operation seems to be contradicting that. I don't think it is. I hope I'm wrong. Another thing I've been saying since October 7th. But we will find out. Maybe not on today's show, but we'll talk about it on today's show. Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 214 of the war in Israel. Morgan, your thoughts about what happened last night, developments since, and anything else to do with Rafah or this deal?
Well, to be honest, I never thought we would see the day that they went into Rafah. I mean, I'm trying to think exactly when it was that they first announced they would go in by Ramadan. I think that must have been in February, right? And that was about a month away, and then Ramadan passed, and now here we are. Um, I mean, it's Netanyahu has this unfortunate propensity to say all the right things and then to not do them, to not follow them up in action in any way. I mean, he seems to be a true ditherer. Now, it's good that they've finally gone in. I guess the process has been that he's tried to see what he can get from negotiations, and once they seem to have broken down, he's now sending in the troops. And as we might expect, the international media has been kind of in its hysterical death throes about this, posting lots of pictures of the children celebrating in the street about the Hamas announcing that they're going to accept a deal. It's interesting that they're dancing in the streets that Hamas is going to accept the deal, not that Israel is going to accept the deal. I don't know if that's just because, in the sense, that those children were told to dance, or whether it's because they understand that Hamas doesn't really have their interests at heart. So maybe they're celebrating because that Hamas has finally done that. I don't know. Be an interesting thing to find an answer to. But ultimately, whatever ends up going on in Rafah, there's there's a way in which Israel has already lost the war in a meaningful way. I think just how much time and delay has gone on. Hamas has already almost certainly been able to get some of its people out of the country. I know there are already some outside. So lots more Israelis are going to die because of the dithering. Certainly lots more Israeli soldiers as they would have been able to entrench in Rafah. It's good that they've finally gone in, but it feels a bit like too little too late at this point.
Yeah, sorry, was muted. Yeah, so I'm guessing we're going to hear about soldiers, the way we heard before. They're going to be announced in the morning. Six soldiers died in the last few days, two of them in the north of Israel, where Israel is still not operating and is being attacked on a daily basis and not responding militarily. Again, one of the most when historians look back at what Israel was and how it ceased to exist, I think what's going on in the north of Israel is going to be something that's going to be talked about more than what's going on in Gaza. Look, El Rito says huge balls to go to Rafah. Uh, yes, in a sense, it seems that way because of all the international pressure. But the thing is, Netanyahu should have acted immediately, and he didn't. And I'm gonna I'm gonna find that tweet of mine from October 8th and read it exactly because I unfortunately called it and and it wasn't difficult to call. We've seen it before. The moment to act decisively in a manner that Israel had never acted before militarily was October 7th and October 8th. And it was in Gaza and in southern Lebanon and potentially in the West Bank. That was the moment because that was the moment that the world leaders were expressing support for Israel and saying how Israel should defend itself and saying that Hamas should be destroyed. And Israel acting then would be, basically calling their bluff if they were bluffing, which of course we know now that they were. So yeah, huge balls to be the idiot who lets Hamas run things for 6.5 months and then do a military operation that again we don't know the extent of it. This might not be the extent of it. It might be it. It might be that Israel is doing just a little bit to say, look, we went into Rafah. We said we would, and now we did. And then they're gonna back out. So look, I'll say this again. I hope I'm wrong here, but I'm not.
No, I don't think you are. Again, it's interesting looking at the response to this because there's been such a build up around Rafah for months now. And China, interestingly, issued a condemnation of going into Rafah, saying that there needs to be humanitarian action taken, not invasions or something, coming from China of all countries. I mean, let's save that tweet for when they finally invade Taiwan and just play that back to them. So there are lots of people who are making a lot of hay out of this, and yet going to Rafah, I mean, it's the necessary thing to do to finish off this stage of the war, if you like. But finishing off Hamas is going to be something which I think probably is going to take a lot longer. Not only because their leadership is in Qatar. There was an interesting story about how they're on the verge of being thrown out of Qatar, supposedly because they're displeasing the Qataris. But Rafah, even if it's not going to finish Hamas finally, it's certainly the most important thing to do. And I was having a good close look at Rishi Sunak's statement about this because it'd be rather telling about his opinion, exactly what he says. And he says, "Oh, I'm very concerned, and I've even spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu about this." He didn't say that it shouldn't happen, and he didn't actually condemn it. He just said he was concerned. And actually, David Cameron, who can always be trusted to say something terrible, actually hasn't said anything about this thus far. It's actually fallen to David Lammy, who's the Foreign Shadow Secretary, to condemn this. So it's interesting that actually some of the leaders who are making negative noises about this, if we're talking about Western leaders, actually haven't condemned it. I think perhaps because they ultimately know that this is exactly what has to happen, except they'll be cast as a pariah, just like Israel is, if they were to come out and say that this is the right thing to do and it's necessary and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, the China, thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. The China point, reminds me of this map I saw somebody tweet, anti-Israel tweet, a map of all the countries kind of highlighted in green, all the countries that recognize Palestine as a Palestinian state. And it is all the shittiest, worst countries in the world in terms of countries you would never want to live in because if you well for many many reasons, but the most basic one is you don't have they don't protect basic rights of their own citizens, so of course they jump to recognize any country that also is on their side of the fight between civilization and barbarism. Unfortunately, Western countries are as I've said, we're running on fumes philosophically, and we are heading in that direction as well. So you do see more and more countries potentially doing the same. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Enric says, one report I saw is that Israel is just securing the Rafah border crossing to Egypt. Yeah, that's what I have also seen. But again, look, that's what they're doing now. Let's now that they're actually operating, let's wait and see and hope that we're wrong. But that border, yeah, we're actually it's May 7th, so we're 7 months exactly since the attack. And if anybody wanted to escape into Egypt, I don't think securing that border today will prevent that from happening. Thank you, Ori, for the super chat. Um, yeah, Morgan, your thoughts, and then I want to get to something very disturbing going on in Israel.
Well, just since you were talking about Egypt, I was in a sense going to throw it back to you, but I'll just explain why. What's your sense of Egypt's, let's say, cooperation or willingness to let people escape into Egypt? Because people will make various claims about it, and yet it's not very clear to me. Because sometimes they suggest that they don't like Hamas and they're not really very happy with what Hamas is doing, not exactly as if they have a different ideological orientation, but just that they find Hamas troublesome in some way. So do you think that they would let Hamas escape into Egypt?
I don't know. I think they do hate each other. I think there's a lot of hatred, in the Arab world between people. There's what Rand called global balkanization, and she, had a broader reference there, but she used the Balkans as an example. Is very much true of of the Arab world. But they are united in their hatred of Israel. So, Qatar, the news, I also saw the news that Qatar is considering getting rid of Hamas. The only reason they have Hamas there in the first place isn't because they love them. It's because they hate Israel and they hate Jews, and Hamas is leading the Arab world in the killing of Jews. So, kind of like when the West tries to find allies among the worst people in the world, thinking the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And again, that's why we in the West are looking at Egypt and at Qatar as potentially partners for negotiation, which in Qatar's case is absolutely ridiculous, but also in Egypt's case is yeah, the leadership in Egypt is at odds with the Muslim Brotherhood. That doesn't mean they are good guys. They are not good guys. They are anti-Israel. They are anti-Western. And uh, look, if yeah, whether or not they let Hamas escape in, or whether Hamas can do it without them letting them in, yeah, we should stop looking at any country in the Middle East except Israel as allies of the West.
Yeah, for sure. And the other part of the story with them securing the border, again, that people are going apoplectic about, is that supposedly aid which was coming through that border has been shut off. And then the other border at I'm forgetting its name, but the crossing in the north of Israel, I think, has been closed off. And I saw Elon Levy posting something about it because it got bombed. It isn't because Israel wants to shut off. Blah, blah, blah. There's such a circus around aid, and it just seems to go in this never-ending cycle. I don't know if you feel like this. I just end up feeling exhausted around it, where Israel is, suicidally generous. Its opponents say it's not being suicidally generous enough, and then Hamas does something, and then Israel gets blamed for that, and so on and so forth. So, if people are noticing that aid is coming up again and that they're worrying about it, I think just at this point, aid is going to be brought up no matter what, and it actually has no bearing upon the rectitude or not of what Israel's doing. I think Israel is right to go into Rafah and secure the border. Um, and whatever people are saying about aid, I mean, it's almost just arbitrary at this point in my mind. It's just completely farcical.
Yeah, that crossing is Kerem Shalom. That's where, yeah, that was bombed by Hamas a few days ago. 4 soldiers died. Many were injured. Um, and yeah, Israel closed it. I think Biden, in his call with Netanyahu, reportedly demanded that it be reopened. Yeah, Biden is no longer hiding where he is. Tomorrow's episode, by the way, of the Daily Objective, I don't know if it's already been scheduled or is about to be scheduled, but it is going to be Hamas's top negotiator, I believe is the title, and it is about Biden. We're going to talk about him, and I see Davy Boy in the chat saying the jihadis of Malmo played a role in Sweden's silly policy. I need to scroll up to see which policy you're referring to, but Thursday's episode of the reality show is titled Malmo versus the Jews. So yeah, we are going to be talking about some of this stuff coming up. One thing that I mentioned that I talked about on October 8th on my Twitter, I will now read that tweet because I think it's very relevant. I'm at Razi Ginzberg, by the way, on it's X now, not Twitter. Recommend myself. The tweet goes, the longer Israel waits before taking military action, the less legitimacy it has from the international community to do what has to be done, the complete destruction of Hamas and a full permanent reoccupation of what little is left of Gaza. Netanyahu knows this. Maybe that's why he's waiting. So, yeah, I still think Netanyahu is very much a coward who is choosing not to do what needs to be done in Gaza, didn't want to do what needed to be done on October 7th, on October 8th, in Gaza and in South Lebanon, and is using the fact that Biden is anti-Israel as his excuse. If, I don't think Trump is as pro-Israel as some people think, but if there was actually a pro-Israel person in the White House, if Nikki Haley was in the White House, I don't know how Netanyahu would handle that because she would be demanding things that he would be refusing to do against the Palestinians. She would actually say you have to destroy Hamas. How would Netanyahu handle that? That's a good question. I don't know what the answer to that is. Unfortunately, we're not going to find out. Thank you, Wes Stewart, for the super chat. Morgan.
I mean, I guess just the other aspect of the story we're talking about, because we're saying, Hamas consented to agree to a deal, and the whole international media jumped up and down and celebrated that they've done that. And Israel again gets cast as the vicious party as because they haven't consented to it, they haven't agreed to it. It isn't even clear exactly what version of a deal that Hamas has agreed to, according to what Israel is saying. They're not sure exactly what it is that Hamas has consented to. And all of these celebrations are entirely premature. Until both parties agree on such a term, on the terms, there is no deal and there is no peace, there is no ceasefire. Now, I think that's a good thing that there is no peace and ceasefire because these people are misguided. But everyone, again, just gets to cast Israel as the nasty pariah nation that's ruled by some militaristic faction or something. And the Palestinians are the ones who are really celebrating peace here. And Hamas almost ends up being portrayed as if it's the kind of morally responsible party. And people are acting completely insane when they're reporting on the war. And at this point, I don't know what else to say about it except that it's just truly insane.
A friend and supporter of ARCUK sent me a message yesterday, which I think he posted on Facebook, so I'm hoping he'll be okay with me reading this. He texted me to say Hamas is good at PR for the stupid. They've accepted terms that Israel hasn't agreed to, so that to the stupid, it is Israel who is the difficult party. And yeah, I responded letting him know what the stupid are doing in Israel. So after the news came out, the first report I saw said thousands of people, but I don't know if that's correct, but many people went out to the street to protest against Israel going into Rafah. I mean, this is another thing I talked about after October 7th. The resolve shown by the Israeli people, unfortunately, for the most part, was not real. It was anger, it was emotion, it was emotional, and it was correct emotions. But those emotions should have been acted upon, or should have been assessed rationally and then acted upon because they were, they should have been what they were. But yeah, that is kind of past. October 7th was a while ago now. Come on, it's been 7 months. Why are you still, looking back at the past? And yeah, people are actually going out and saying, look, Hamas wants a deal, and you, Israel, are, yeah, as this message said, being difficult because you instead insist on defeating the people who took those hostages, and oh, by the way, also slaughtered over 1,000 people and committed the worst atrocities imaginable. Thank you, Frank, for the super chat. Frank said, was the IDF ready on October 8th to go all out? No. You're right. They weren't ready to go all out on a ground operation. There could not have been a successful ground operation for at least weeks at that point. They could have done a lot more from the air. They could have bombed Gaza into oblivion, which is what they should have done. They should have made Gaza Dresden. That was the thing to do on October 8th. And yeah, nothing like that was done. A bit more bombing was done maybe than usual, but still with the phone calls. By the way, do we have that phone call, Morgan? I don't think we can play the whole thing, but if we can play some of it, this is a phone call from yesterday, which would be interesting. If not, we can talk about it. But yeah, we don't. So yeah, in short, this is a phone call. It's on Twitter. I'll retweet it so people who are following me get the benefit of following me and listen to that. It's in Arabic, but it's translated to English. Somebody from the IDF calling somebody, I believe in Rafah, saying, "We're gonna bomb your building. Get out." And they start like a whole debate with the guy who's yeah, that's I can hear it in the background there, Morgan. They start a whole the IDF guy starts a whole debate with the guy, and the guy says, "No, we are ready to die," and propagandizes in support of the terrorists. And he said, the IDF guy said, "You're okay with the children in the building dying? We're gonna bomb it anyway." And he said, "Yeah, we're all ready to die," and so on. And he says to him, "The Quran forbids suicide. This is a suicide mission." So it's so pathetic that Israel is pandering. And I guarantee you, if the guy didn't leave, we don't know what happened afterwards. If the guy didn't leave, the IDF didn't bomb the building. So yeah, this is how you lose a war. You ask the enemy to stop killing you when they say, "We want nothing from life, not nothing from, the next few hours, nothing from life other than killing you." And we are proud to die in that process. And yeah, Israel is accepting their terms and not accepting their terms in the sense of saying, "Well, here you go, here is your martyr's death."
Yeah. Well, I don't think anyone who's listening could really name a war which has been fought on more self-sacrificial, altruistic terms than Israel is fighting this war. Almost any other one, I don't think there's one even close. I don't think even really Afghanistan or Iraq fought by the West would come as close to this, even though there's lots of similar things going on in those situations. But again, the way that Israel gets treated, despite that being their behavior, is as if they're worse than the Nazis. I mean, and that's the explicit comparison that's being made. It's being made by some people and probably under the comments of this video later on. And it's a truly confusing situation as to what exactly it is that causes that. Partly, it's the animus towards Israel from the whole history of the conflict, but so many people in the West are actually quite ignorant of that as to how it is exactly that they kind of pick this up and end up embodying it and reiterating it on Twitter, on the streets, on university campuses. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird kind of mind virus that just has infected the whole West at the moment. And although we can talk about the various factors, actually holding that together and as one kind of causal explanation is quite difficult, I find.
Thank you, Ebog, for the super chat. Ebog says, "Have you seen the terms of the fake deal yesterday? I found a video explaining the absurdity as well as the previous negotiations. Hamas wants peace but wants to keep the majority of the hostages." Yeah, and again, Israel has been agreeing to this stuff. So I don't know if the number of Hamas terrorists released is known. It is not known to me. But the last thing I saw, which Hamas rejected, was something like 900, with at least 100 of them being convicted of murder, and who are going to be released. And yeah, it would be for 33 hostages. And Hamas's terms were, the hostages could be dead or could be alive. It's either or. You'll find out when we send them back. So I don't. I also know this is some Egyptian proposal. One of the Egyptian proposals that I saw in the past week or so involved recognition by Israel of a Palestinian state within 5 years. So, which is, of course, a great reward. It is, again, like every move towards that is a reward to terrorism and a clear statement. This is you got this for October 7th. You would not have gotten this otherwise. You got this because you did what you did, and implied is you want more, you have to do more of what you did on October 7th. Thank you, Gail, for the super chat. Yeah, Morgan, I don't know if we should play that call. We only have a few minutes left.
Okay,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, yes. I mean, it's a sign of the way that people think about this when we're saying the way that this has infected people, that they actually end up rewarding the act of terrorism. It's an indication of the way that they're thinking about it really as an article of faith, or like it's a kind of peculiar religion that infects people, that all of the civilians in Gaza are innocent. They have nothing to do with Hamas. I mean, you dare even make the suggestion that that Hamas has embedded itself in the civilian population, despite that being what any organization that's looked into Gaza knows. Lest you suggest that Hamas uses human shields and so on and so forth, right? So they're not even really thinking about, because they're thinking about this religiously, they're not thinking causally. They're not thinking about the consequences of what they're doing, of what rewarding Hamas and the Palestinians will produce. And unfortunately, given that that's how they're thinking about it, that is the whole thinking that has fueled the conflict, I think, for a long time. And it's what will fuel it into the next decade and decade after that, and so on. So people really need to uproot this religious faith, which somehow they absorb, that everything is just fantastic on the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people have nothing to do with Hamas, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we will be covering this tomorrow as well from the angle of where the U.S. currently stands, and by the U.S. I mean Biden. Yes, you people who didn't vote for him, he is your president. The I know hashtag not my president is popular among every side that doesn't like their current leader, but he is representing your country as as I say to Israelis, Netanyahu is your prime minister, and you are suffering the consequences. So we're going to talk about Biden tomorrow. You mentioned Nazis, the Nazi comparison. Yesterday in Israel was Holocaust Memorial Day, and it's more relevant than ever this year. So on the reality show, we're going to talk about that following this show. Why Never Again Happened Again is the title of that, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the world and why the lessons haven't been learned from the Holocaust and from Nazi Germany. Thanks everybody for watching. Morgan, thanks for joining me. If you like this content and you think it's valuable, like it, share it, comment below, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the reality show in a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Bye bye.